All right, I've got the recording set. Thank you everyone for coming to the presentation. Thank you, Michael, for the introduction. Let me make sure I've got my camera and mic turned on. Kind of missing my dual screens right now, just on a laptop. So let me go ahead and, if you haven't already, go ahead and get into WooClap. So it's wooclap.com/spicy. So it's right there on the screen and in the chat. Let me go ahead and bring up the presentation. So today we are talking about spicing up your Moodle life. Because, sometimes we all get kind of in a design rut. And so I wanted to talk about some things that I've done that have helped me put some design elements into my course. A little bit about me, like Michael mentioned. So I work at Idaho State University as an instructional technologist. I've been working with Moodle since 2015. I was a student employee working on my undergrad, found the Instructional Technology Resource Center, was working there for a student, and then it was about 2017 where I was hired full-time and been working there ever since. So it's been really good, and I'm really excited to do a little bit more design work at Idaho State University. Before we get started, let me double check the chat real quick. Oh, thank you for resending that. So again, we're going into spicing up your Moodle life. And so just like any good infomercial that you see on TV, a lot of times when they're trying to sell you something, so a good idea, they remind you how bad your life is before then. So the question, how do you describe your current course design? Do you find it dull, boring, meaningless? So let me go ahead and pull up the WooClap so that you can let us know how you would describe your current course design, and we'll give it a minute for all those responses to come in. And it is just blowing up like a storm over here. All right, let's try a couple of different views just to see. So we've got a couple of people who are new to this, a couple of people who feel bored. I did see someone or a couple that put fabulous. So maybe they're looking at this just to see what some ideas are. But yeah, so hopefully what you get out of this session are some ideas. Let me go ahead and go back to the presentation. So hopefully the goal of this presentation is to talk about adding some personality, interactivity, and creativity into your Moodle course. Let me just double check the chat, make sure we're good. Perfect. All right, so this is kind of our roadmap that we're going to go through about what you can do in your course. So partly what I wanted to do first with personality is look at a side-by-side comparison of a traditional course you might find in Moodle, and kind of get some of your take on this too. So let me go ahead and do a quick course design of course A. So this is a building construction fire protection course. Let me also make it so it fits in the screen a little bit better. And I'm just kind of going to scroll through and just have you kind of take in the design of this course, of how it's kind of been put into Moodle. And I'll go through all the weeks for you. And you can see that as we go on, there's not really a whole lot of difference as you go week to week. You've got some instruction in here and a couple of activities. So now let me go ahead and show course B. and take a look at the content within it. Start taking notes of things because we're look at differences between the two sites. Let me go ahead and go through this all the way, trying not to, hopefully this is working well for you on the other side on Zoom, that you're seeing these courses pretty good. So I'm go ahead and bring up my second WooClap question. Which course looks more aesthetically pleasing, structured, organized? All right, we've got one outlier looking at course A, we've got two people looking at course A now. Most of the people are looking at course B. And so let's go ahead and take a moment before I really go into my points and open it up the mic session for a bit of what were some things that made you think that course B was more aesthetically pleasing, structured, and organized. Labels helped, I saw that. These looked interesting. Will you have links to or even screenshots of both course designs? I will put the link to the presentation because I do have some screenshots in the presentation itself. I see pictures, images, icons. Some people got dizzy with that. I'm sorry about that piece of it. Trying to show both courses. Sorry about getting you dizzy. Okay, images, icons, color, organization. Perfect. All right, so let's go into some of the reasons why I feel like some of those things helped with course B. So going back to the presentation. So the first point is some of you talked about images. So reason why I think images are good to add to a course, or when you use images in course, I like to look at things like making sure that they all have a consistent width. So in course B, I definitely try to make sure I didn't have images that were super large that you had to scroll the images themselves to see what they were. I tried to keep them small, consistent. I also, in the design process, wanted to make sure that the images were related to the topic. And in this course, they already had presentations, so most of the images they had, I could just pull those from the presentation and add them into the course here. And then there's a thing called similar design DNA. And what I mean by that is that the images that you use have a similar look and feel. That's something that I try to do when I'm adding graphical elements to my course. As an example, let me go back to the presentation and go to, so on this image, on this slide here, these are 3 separate images that I just pulled from the web. And one of the things that I did to give them a similar design DNA was I changed their color scheme. So they all have this orange-ish color palette tied to them. So I tried to give them, make them coherent by giving them something that brought them together. So that's what I mean by design DNA. When you're picking out images and when you can do the little bit of formatting. The next thing is a lot of you picked up on the use of labels. Labels are a great way to help organize your course. Labels create white space, so you're not just looking at a whole block of text. They implement structure, so I've got heading styles in here with, if I remember right, like the week itself is a heading 2, chapter 2 should be a heading 3, week outcomes, learning guides, resources, activities, I believe I put them at a heading 4. So you want to make sure that there is some structure in those. Oh, and it's accessible too. Thank you, Gavin. Yep, because we definitely want all learners to be able to access. So by using those heading styles, you definitely get accessibility in there as well. And then also navigation. And this kind of helps with the structure and instruction is it's easier to navigate, that you know what you can be doing. This course specifically, we set it up where we've got the week outcomes listed first, what they're going to be doing in the learning guide, and then actually listing out the resources, things that they're going to be, things we want them to know, and then learning activities, things we want them to do. So that's kind of how this is. And overall, in my opinion, looking at this makes it an overall easier to read course. And then this next one is the use of emojis. Now this is something that I was one that I never really used emojis a lot in phone and stuff, but then I kind of found this interesting to apply, because I know in the first session we talked about in the Learning Still Matters, we did talk about kind of that glance appeal. And so I felt like emojis kind of provide a little bit of that. Basically, the reason why I like to use emojis in my course is that they symbolize an idea, they bring design consistency, and they also add graphical elements. So you can see, like in the first example here, like in that course specifically, I used the fire emoji because it was a fire. So I kind of had a little bit of fun giving the course some personality with those. In later courses, I actually took the content and tried to find an emoji that matched with it. So this first one being building construction and fire service. So we put a fire truck in there. Building classification, instructional fire resistance, it's a paper scroll. So again, I tried to look at what best emoji fits into the course. And you can see in our course specifically, the Spice Up Your Moodle Life, I added emojis to the different topics as well, so that's an option. Things to be aware of when you're using emojis in your course, just like if you're cooking, looking at the recipe, you always want to avoid overusing ingredients. So for example, if you oversalt the dish, it becomes unedible. So you want to make sure that you avoid excessiveness of oh, I'm going to use emojis in everything. That's not what I'm saying. They should be sprinkled out throughout the course to help balance, and like I said, to have a little bit of fun, but don't get carried away. Also, you want to avoid offensive emojis. There's emojis out there that they seem harmless, but they actually have a negative connotation matched to them. The one example that I came up across recently is the OK symbol. When it's actually used as emoji, it brings a whole nother different context. So you want to be careful with the types of emojis you look, and this is the resource that I want to provide, is the emojipedia.org site. I use this a lot because then it allows me to actually search for where are the Bengals, so I'm going to find a tiger emoji. So I can come through here, search for it, click on the specific emoji that I want. It gives me some information about it. Emojipedia is also really good about talking about some of that offensive or negative connotation that's tied to some emoji. So you'd want to read that first. And then it just allows me to copy it to my clipboard. And then anywhere that I can put in text, I can paste it into the field. And so Emojipedia is a great source. I use it all the time for my Google Drive when I am organizing information in my inbox. I've used it for labels in there. So I'm a big fan of using emojis to add graphical elements to my content. Let me go ahead and check the chat real quick. I've had error message when pasting emojis into topic lines. I'm working with an old Moodle version. Okay, that's something to be aware of. We are in Idaho State University, we are version 3.7 going to 3.9 in the fall. Michael, do you have any insight on that or advice?
Not off the top of my head, but yeah, I mean, it's a classic thing. Test before you invest too much effort into something.
Yep, thank you. And then, yep, thank you for discussing the potential offensiveness of emojis, important and often overlooked. Yeah, you don't necessarily want to just throw in the eggplant emoji just willy-nilly. So you want to be careful of those. You have to paste them as images rather than topic in topic lines. Usually I can just paste them. I don't know much on the back end of those, but gotcha. Um, yep, today, look at that. Today is World Emoji Day. Possibly an issue with character sets on database. Okay, good to know. And then Michael can clarify, but I don't believe we use extensions on Moodle.
We use plugins, but we don't use. I'm not sure. I'm guessing extensions is something that's added a bunch of stuff to Moodle. We do use a couple plugins, but I'm not familiar with that.
But yeah, like I said, it's a great way, emojis, like I said, if it works great. And like I said, it's more of those just to add a little bit of personality flair into the course. All right, so the next kind of changing gears, talking about some of the elements to give your course some personality. Let's also talk about giving your course some interactive elements. So I'm a big fan of Google Slides. We're a G Suite school at Idaho State University, so I try to use the tools that are already available to us. So one of the things that you can do in Google Slides, and I'll talk a little bit later why does this apply to Moodle, is in Google Slides you can create interactive nonlinear presentations. So for example, when I click on this link here, it's a link and it jumps to a specific slide in the slide deck. So going through here, so this is learning about 3-point lighting. So I can totally play with these and interchange them. And depending on what links I press, the slide goes into shows the content. So Google Slides is a great way to kind of create some fun, interactive, nonlinear type presentations. The thing that I like about nonlinear presentations in general is they're self-paced. You can add some interactive, just like with talking about the Google or the 3-point lighting simulator. They're fun to create in my opinion, because you kind of have to get everything all mapped out first, and then you can start building and creating. This example here was actually something I found on the web, that it was initially Flash content, and we know that Flash isn't going to be supported. So I knew I couldn't put that Flash content in a course for very long, because then it would end up not being supported. So I basically took that and converted it into a Google Slide presentation. And then there's also some troubleshooting skills, because you have to figure out, okay, I've got these different slides all set up. Now I need to figure out the right path that learners are going to take to go through this nonlinear presentation. And then the last part that I really like with Google Slides is I can take that and actually embed it into Moodle. And we'll look at how that's been done in an example course. Let me check the chat. So for auto captioning, it does have it. I didn't want to turn it on because I know we're going to caption these. I'm pretty sure we're going to caption these later, and I didn't want to have two different layers of captions going on. But yeah, Google Slides can do live captioning. Yep, Gavin's right. Because I know Gavin had talked about Office 365 does a pretty good job with the text to speech. I don't know what the correct term would be, but Google Slides is better than nothing. So, and then let me go ahead and go to the next slide, because then I can show you the example. Oh, might help if there we go. All right, so not only can you um, embed nonlinear presentations like Google Slides, but there's also creating videos with hotspots in them. I know Camtasia allows you to do that. I believe YouTube allows you to do hotspots as well. And then there's also embedding H5P into courses. So let me go ahead and hop into our instruction here. So this is a Moodle book that I created for a course. Again, we're sticking with the having labels, having that white space. And then we have our first Google slide in here. So I'm talking about video editing with Camtasia. So with this nonlinear presentation, a student can come down here and then rather than me saying, hey, we're gonna meet on Zoom and I'm gonna do a lecture, instead I'm gonna just post a nonlinear interactive presentation in the course. And then I like Google Slides also for the fact that not necessarily needing to download to view the content, it's just saw in the web browser itself. So I've got this set up with different topics that they can choose. So they can choose to take it like a standard Google slide and take it slide at a time, or they can decide what they want to learn first. So I'll go to video editing strategies, and then let's go to folder organization. So in here in Google Slides, of course, it allows you to add video that they can watch, images. If I go to design consistency here, I have an audio clip that they can play and listen to within the slide itself. They can jump to specific slides if they want. They can come back to the home screen. So I just think personally it's another great way for students to kind of tread the content without needing to sit in a long lecture. If they can just go through the content their own and hear everything that you need to explain to them. And then it's as simple as in Google Slides, and I think I'll try and do a Loom video and post that in of the process. Because essentially you go to Google Slides, you grab the embed code, and then you come into Moodle, turn editing on, and then you can paste the embed link in here, and then it will display. So I will do a Loom presentation on that after this, so you have steps on how to do that. All right, so the next we've got file organization. So here I used H5P to embed some interactive content into the course. So we have the H5P plugin built into our instance of Moodle. And then basically I create the activity on the course page. I'll hide it from students there, but then I will paste the embed code into the Moodle book. And then it's just here, they read the content, and then they're able to participate in this activity, which is basically a drag and drop. We've got our folders that we'd use for a video project. Then they have to decide what folders would look best in this. So they can go through this and then check their information once they complete it. And then it's one of those things that it's not a major assignment, it's just something for them to do repeatedly just to get an idea of on this topic, which is file organization. Check the chat. Okay, yep. Yep, H5P is perfect for knowledge checking. That's what I like to use it for, is just throw it in here. So I also like the fact of having the content and the H5P side by side. And I'm really excited to play with Moodle's 3.9 where H5P will be part of core and it will have a content bank. There's a lot of stuff with H5P in the newest version of Moodle, but I'm really excited to play with that. But this is kind of the before that. But yeah, H5P in the book, I really like doing that for learners. In this one, I just embedded a video that they can watch. So that one's pretty normal as far as what we're used to. I also, to an extent, like using YouTube in the sense, because most places it's easier to have the YouTube link embed easier. I used to I mean, normally I would like to store all my videos on Google Drive and then have them in my Moodle course, because I feel like I have more control of my Google Drive in some instances, but I always have issues with embedding. I can never get it right where it's easy every time. I always have to do a little bit more work for those. So YouTube is nice because most things know how to just embed YouTube videos, especially with Moodle having the YouTube filter, makes that really easy. Here we've got the presentation, like I talked about. So this is another Google slide just focusing on 3-point lighting that students can just play with, interact with, just to get an idea of that concept. Green screen effect. So in here, I added a Giphy just to bring out the point across. We also have a green screen simulator, very simple. And then I've got some videos in here from YouTube, and then from other sites as well that have their knowledge base on the different tools being talked about. Let me go. Perfect, just some insight on that, so thank you. So yeah, let me go ahead and go back to the presentation because I've got another question to ask the group. So which interactive element intrigued you the most? 1 being boring, 5 being exciting. And you can see I've got things such as the embedded presentations, the embedded, the embedded presentations such as the video editing presentation non-linear. I also have the embedded H5P file organization, the Google Slides, and doing the 3-point lighting and green screen simulators, and then your standard embedded videos in the Moodle book. And I can see those coming in. I'll double check the chat again. You can do all 5s if you like them. I'm not going to be a stickler on this. So yeah, if you thought they were all exciting, fantastic. But all I care about is you being honest at this point. Oh, and for some reason I have a option 5 that doesn't have anything. So see, let's also check out some of these the radar chart looks pretty interesting. So all in all, it looks like they're all fairly tied, that you found them all interesting. That's good. It'd be really sad if they were all boring, then I'd have to go back to the drawing board. But we'll go ahead and take those, and I think that's a really good. So thank you. Hopefully that you found some of those helpful. Again, I'll try and put some instructions about how to actually embed those specifically so you can have access to that knowledge or that skill set. All right, so now we're going to switch gears now to talk about creativity. So I'll talk about my first moot. So I don't know if I mentioned it before, but this is my 3rd moot that I have attended so far. So my first moot, I didn't really know quite what to expect, but some of my impressions that I really got from the purpose of Mountain Moot was, 1, basically seeing what everyone else is doing. And then part of that was, I remember, I think it was probably Michelle Moore giving the keynote presentation, and I remember her talking about um, giving the students the ability to create. So I remember coming out of that um, conference looking for ways of, okay, how do we get students to maybe create their own questions in the quiz tool? How do we get students to create content and share it with others? So that's been always a thing that I always come back to with these um, Mountain Moot conferences, is looking and seeing how can we get students in the driver's seat, because I know there's a lot of fun that we can have um, with creating content. So how do we give students that same feeling as well? Let me check the chat. Yes, Michelle will tell you about the glossary. Thank you. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about, and maybe this is new. In the last couple of conferences, we've been talking a lot about H5P and using it. And so one of the things that I wanted to talk about in this conference was, okay, how do we get students to create H5P for us? Because I know there's h5p.org, which you can create a free account. You can create content there, but really the purpose of that site is to trying to create content initially and seeing if you like it or not. But when it comes to actually like embedding content from h5p.org, it's not reliable because you don't know if it's going to stay there. So of course there's h5p.com, which means you'd have to pay for storage to create it. But because we have Moodle and have the plugin, all of our H5P is stored on Moodle. So we've got the plugin. So the trick for me was, okay, how do I get this tool so students can play with it? So I'm going to go to and turn editing on. And you can do this process for any activity or resource in Moodle. But what I've done, let me go back to, is I've got an H5P. So I created kind of a template of what that activity was going to do. And then for every student in the course, I duplicated that activity multiple times. And what you can do, if I click on the activity itself, open the gear menu, you have this locally assigned roles option. So I can come in here and then I can go to a specific role, and for that activity, I can make those individuals teachers or give them the teacher role of that specific activity. So they become the teachers. That way I'm not worried about them touching other people's stuff. They can leave it hidden. And when they're ready to make it available, they can show it. But then they can come in and create their H5P activity, make it available to other students to try it out. And then I just had them use a discussion form to talk about that specific activity. So that's a quick way that, or I'll rephrase that. It's one way that you can create an activity so that students can have the teacher role and be able to use H5P to create content. This was a design class that I was developing it for. So the students were basically creating content for instruction that they planned to teach. And so we got a whole bunch of different viewpoints. Ideally, what you might do is say, hey, here's this topic that I want all the students to build content for. So maybe I have them do something on 3-point lighting and they have to create content. So I'm getting all these different versions or adaptations of students creating content for me about 3-point lighting, and then they can rate each other on it, maybe using the glossary tool like Michelle's talked about in other presentations. But it's one way to kind of share the fun of having students play with that H5P. Let me go ahead and look at the chat and see what, perfect, okay. And if I've missed a question, feel free to let me or let Michael know so we can get it. But yeah, the only thing that I found right now to be aware of is if you've got a class of um, 80 plus students, 50 plus, it does get pretty tedious because you have to create the role for, or you have to create the activity for each student and then go into locally assigned roles and give that student that specific role. So there's a lot of preparation that does have to take place when you're doing this type of activity. I'm also need to take some more time and look at permissions because I know permissions can give you something extra things that students can do. But that's kind of the next thing of, okay, if I've got a 100 plus class, how do I do an activity like this? Or does it make sense to do an activity like that? The other option I was thinking about, you could do group work. So um, being able to only take care of 4H5P, but then have it assigned so only people in that group can work on would be maybe another way to tie down making only 10 H5P instead of 100, just depending on what your needs are for doing that. But yeah, the locally assigned role feature, because it's in Moodle, if you wanted students to create an assignment or create a rubric in an assignment or actually carry out assignment, a quiz, that's one option that you could potentially use that a locally assigned role feature for. Okay, let me go back to the chat. Can you assign roles to groups? I am trying to remember because it looks like my initial is going to be no, because I'm not seeing anything immediately about that. But again, there could be something that I'm not aware of at this time to do that with. Okay, and there's other consensus of that as well. So, but yeah, that's why I was kind of thinking more of maybe using permissions in the sense of group roles, but I can't remember if teachers actually have access to the permissions piece. I'll have to double check that piece of it. But like I said, those are just some ideas that I've been having of how to get students to kind of create and enjoy H5P. Because I mean, I have fun playing with it as well. So why not share that with my students? Yeah, so that's actually something I've done in this course as well, not specifically for H5P, but if I come down to the web instructional unit, so this course, they're actually going to create their own unit. And so I've actually created a secondary course, and I'll have that open up. So in this course, all of my students actually have the teacher role. And then I divided it up with the different, they basically all control their own topic. So I have clear rules in here that, if you accidentally delete something, there is the Moodle recycle bin to restore it. But just like if you're in a face-to-face classroom, you need to be mindful of your workspace and everyone else's. So I think it can successfully be done of just having a secondary course. And that's where I think my direction for Moodle 3.9 is going with the content bank is, sure, give them another course that they have the teacher role and they can build their content, but then they should be able to link their content or technically move it into the real site. I still have to play with that, but that's where my mind's kind of going with where do we take this H5P activity for students? Yeah, so basically a secondary course. So at our institution, we have a lot of examples where students enroll into the main course. So maybe it's the lecture course. That's also what it's known by. But then they'll have a secondary course that's the actual lab course. So I kind of use that same framework with doing something like this where they've got the main course where they're actually learning and doing some activities assessment, but then they've got this lab course that they can actually play in. And it's a little bit different because where I have a manager role, it's very easy for me to create a meta link from one main course and tie it to a sub course. But for teachers, you would want to work with your Moodle admin on solutions on what would be the best way to kind of have a secondary course that students could have the teacher role and build their content there, and then do the assessing in the main course. Oh, and lets her faculty create meta links. So for some institutions, that's not a problem at all. So go back to make sure I answer question 4. So this is going to be just an open, kind of like a short word, but the question I have for all of you is, how would students benefit from making their own content, like in the example of the example course? Cool. I'm really liking some of these things. I saw you learn more when you teach. I'm a definite believer in that. It's more times when I'm presenting or having to teach the topic where I, as the student, um, dive more in to make sure that I actually understand the content, because I'm one that I like to plan things out. I don't like to not know what to say or what to do most of the time. So yeah, there's definitely that ownership, learn by doing. I'm seeing a lot of that. Engagement, collaboration is definitely possible, attention to detail. And just something that Michelle talked about in one of her presentations was, instead of students watching one presentation on, say, the water cycle, they are creating 5, 10, 15 different iterations of the water cycle, and then the students get to look at those and rate. So I think there's definite opportunity for, especially in the activity such as that, where they're kind of all developing, or maybe you take it up where, okay, this group or this student has the water cycle, but then we're going to have this student be assigned to the digestive system or animal kingdom, something like that, you know. So then you could also divide up the work that way, and something that they present to the class. I'm a big proponent of, I remember in a open educational resource, I believe it's David Wiley who spoke, and he talked about, it's one thing to, students at the end of the semester, they write a paper, they hand it in, and then that's kind of it. But he had an example where students actually created a video discussing the difference between some as simple as a wiki versus a blog. And it was actually kind of comical too, because they did a debate on it, type of thing. But then that video is still present today and is still being used, and other learners can learn from it. So so that's kind of what I like to see, and how adding interactive content in your course, or allowing your students to create content like that in your course, kind of helps do the same thing of them being able to practice a lot of these skills. More investment in outcome, authenticity, deep learning. There's a link to the course request. I used to automatically roll the course. So the YouTube, I know it was his students, but I believe his name's David Wiley, and I'll put his name in there, because that's all the information I have on him. um, all right, let me go ahead and hop back to the presentation. Let's go back to K. So a lot of you said the same things that I thought about, some of these benefits of students having fun creating content, students get to take ownership of their content. I mean, they're the ones who get to produce it, and then they get to essentially show it off to their peers. Students get to create content for you. And then for you as the instructor, the content is reusable. And the thing I like about H5P, it's free. One of the things I am also looking into, because I know not everyone has access to Moodle, not everyone wants to go the h5p.com route. So I'm still trying to figure out, okay, what could instructor do or a teacher do in a K-12 course to essentially host their own H5P. I'm still kind of looking at what would be the better options, but for the most part, um, if you're using Moodle, H5P is a nice cherry on the top. And then, so this was a course that I helped develop. I'm currently working on my master's program. So this was one of the things that I was assigned to do of rather than take the course, I would design the course. So these were some of the feedback I got from students as they completed the course this summer. I really liked the aspect of each person getting a page to edit and then share with classmates. Learning about H5P, it's a cool tool and has a lot of great and diverse applications. I also liked how we applied it to different types of lessons so it didn't feel repetitive. I really liked that as well, because going back to that course is, for the most part, I kind of had that same model throughout the different weeks that here's some H5P, this is what you're going to do with it, and then let's discuss about what you did type of thing. And so, I mean, it was that same framework, but they were doing something different every week. So I think there's some benefits of doing that as well, rather than completely doing worksheets. Having that framework in place makes it easy or easier to go from this semester to the next semester. All right, and that is the end of my slides. Let's go ahead and open up for if there's any additional questions in the chat, or if you have any questions, comments, concerns. Let's go ahead and hear those. For the one class, I did not have students work as a group. So Deborah asked, do you have students work together as a group? I had them work on their own for this course, just because I wanted to make sure I could do it at the individual level first. One of the things I will be looking at more is doing, okay, what's the best way to do group work, with having them trying to work together and collaborating on H5P or any other activity in Moodle. A presenter at a conference last year set up a WordPress specifically as an H5P hosting, creating site, and then embedded the activity from there. Yeah, I have seen H5 or WordPress as an option. I know that WordPress.com, you do have to pay to get the H5P plugin. Like they have you have to pay so much and then you can start using plugins. So that could be a cheaper route in the long run to do it that way. One of the thoughts I had was using AWS, using one of their, try and figure out their free site, because I know you can do so much free on AWS. And then I know you can do WordPress.org and create a website from there and kind of tie the two, or use Moodle. Like I said, I'm still kind of looking at that piece. But yeah, I think I mean, it's because I hate having instructors pay more for some of these things, but that might, at this point with my knowledge, or WordPress.com, paying for that site and then having that H5P plugin might be the best way to, that way you can embed it into Google Classroom, Moodle, any other website platform that you're using. Okay, and we've got a lot of thank yous. Yeah, so I'll also include my Google slide presentation into the course as well for those of you who want to look at it. It's definitely here for you. Ryan actually said something really cool that I liked, because he talked about doing a presentation where he had a nice cool trick up his sleeve of doing a presentation. At the very end, he kind of gave away his secret. And that's really what Mountain Moot is all about, is we all come here taking the tips we've learned and then turn around and sharing it. So thank you for all coming. Thank you for participating in today's session. Hope you learned something to apply in your class.
Thank you, Lance.
All right, I'll go ahead and stop the recording.